Jimmy McAleer found the net. Goal for Wednesday.
Terrific goal by Sheridan.
Chris Waddle, is he going to have a crack?
Oh, he does, and it's goal. Still Glenn Wheeler. Aidan Flint works the goal. It's the goal.
Is there time for a winner?
Hello and welcome to the Wednesday Till I Die podcast. I am Matt Johnson, and for this episode I am joined by the voice for so many. They are the voice that they will instantly recognise when we talk about Sheffield Wednesday and a matchday commentary. I am of course going to be joined by Rob O'Neill. Rob has been right at the heart of some unforgettable moments for the football club, including one of the most dramatic comebacks in recent football history. And we'll be talking about not only that, but his journey into broadcasting, what it's like behind the mic, and of course, obviously, that incredible night at Hillsborough. Now, I know most people are just used to hearing his voice, but I will bring him on. Here is the man, the myth, the legend. Rob, how are you, mate? You okay?
Hello, how are you? All right? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, all absolutely fine, mate. How are you? You all right?
Yeah, very good, very good. Yeah, looking forward to the end of the season, but apart from that, all good.
Makes two of us. Just before we kind of like dive into it, Rob, can you, for people who are still perhaps a little bit unsure and recognise the voice, would you be able to kind of like tell us a little bit about your role covering Sheffield Wednesday and what exactly it is you do, not only on a match day in terms of the commentary, but also the other side to the role as well?
Yeah, so it's sort of evolved over the years. I started doing it for Sheffield Wednesday in-house, the commentary back, I think it was 2008, 2009. The first game was Sean McCauley's first, actually, when he was the caretaker manager, and we drew 2-2 with Newcastle United. So that kind of came about. I mean, I worked in radio for, quite a while. I mean, I started back in 1995, certainly, as a young lad coming through and that sort of thing. But I got asked to get involved and do it for the club alongside John. And, it's kind of evolved, as I say, over the years. So initially it was just for the home games. And then there was a spell for, I think, a couple of seasons, actually, before COVID, where I was doing the away games as well for the club. And then obviously COVID came and, they had to look at the finances and everything. So it was sort of reshuffled and it was just the home games again. But I've also, in the last probably 18 months, took on another sort of guys as well on a match day. So I also go around the hospitality suites and I interview former players, sometimes the current players, and just add a bit of extra flavour, for the VIP guests and everyone, to get them in the mood for the game to come.
Yeah, that's genuinely, it's really interesting because obviously so many people will just hear you either through the radio or kind of like watching along on kind of like iFollow, or they'll catch snippets of those inside the match days that the club used to put out. Obviously last year where they can hear your voice on stage kind of talking through the match with like the player of the match or whatever, but also perhaps not necessarily understanding everything that goes into your role on a match day, because it is all encompassing, is it? It's not just like turn up 10 minutes before kick-off, have a look at the notes, have a look at the team sheet, sit down and just, here we go. It is quite a substantial role.
It is, and obviously when I'm doing the hospitality, I have to get through the suites at different times. And if you get a really good guest, say, a top player that obviously the fans want to see, they haven't seen him for a while, they're all wanting the autographs, and then thinking, I need to get on, I need to get to the next suite. I've got to get up there to get set up for the commentary or make sure everything's working okay. So, there's some challenges that perhaps you kind of assume that, we've got all these producers in the background, engineers, making sure everything's connected. And it's not always the case. It's never the case. It's me sorting all the line out and making sure it works. So I remember, when we got promoted and Antonio scores one of the goals, I think it was the first, wasn't it, on that day? And the ISDN, which is what we used at that point to broadcast with, the line had cut out. So I was desperately trying to get a connection back. So I'm literally scrambling around trying to change cables on the floor. And I think I literally just pressed the buttons, dialed back in, and I literally popped my head back up. And I could see Antonio moving towards the goal. I couldn't tell you how the ball had got from there to there. But I just screamed. And I think I managed to just about get the key moment in as the ball went in the back of the net because we'd lost connection.
It's always nice to know how the sauce is made, and it is also nice to know that it is still proper nuts and bolts behind the scenes at Sheffield Wednesday. It's a proper, as you rightly say, Rob, you would, let's say for argument's sake, Tottenham, they may be a championship club next year. I know Sheffield Wednesday won't be. there will be 50 different producers, there'll be sound engineers, and you will be just the talent who turns up and does it and talks.
Yeah, I mean, because obviously these days, in more recent times, you've obviously got the in-vision. Well, for some of the clubs, they do like the studio guests, don't they? And they do the full build-up. And there's a lot more to it. Obviously, we haven't gone down that road as a football club for various reasons, but it is more to it. So it's not just an audio commentary as it was when I started. It's now pictures as well. So the sound is sort of joining together. And there's been a few challenges. I mean, even I think it was it 2 seasons ago now? So this isn't just down to Wednesday, but obviously ISDN, which I talked about, is the main way that broadcasting's been done on commentaries. Literally you dial a number. It might seem a bit old-fashioned, but it kind of worked. It was quite simplistic, but it kind of did the job. But they're obviously moving more towards over IP and changing the tech. So they were supposed to be phasing out ISDN entirely. That's obviously an open reach thing right across the country and everything. But they keep pushing back the deadline of when that was going to happen and stuff. But obviously this season, I think the EFL, not this season, last season, decided that they were going to make sure that everybody was broadcasting this way. So all of the commentators that are involved with in-house commentaries and obviously the stuff they do for their own sort of independent feeds that goes to Sky or whatever, that was all going to be over IP. So for the first couple of months, that was really challenging because they decided to effectively test it, with 72 clubs on the first weekend of the season. Imagine what it was like back at base. Things weren't working, and because, I mean, the Wednesday kit that is the special unit that we use to broadcast, that wasn't yet ready for us either because they had to get them manufactured from whoever the EFL. So they supply this piece of kit that we use now, but they needed to obviously get more manufactured and delivered to all the different clubs. So to start with, I had this other piece of £50 bit of gear that they used where I had to put it through my laptop, probably similar way to the way you've got it all set up. Yeah. And you have to get it all to work in this different way. So you're going over a website and trying to make it talk to it in the right way. And you can imagine there were a few teething problems for those first few games of the season. And then finally they got us a unit. Well, they didn't get us a unit because it wasn't quite ready yet. So I had to get the spare kit from Sheffield United. So I had the spare kit of Sheffield United, which I think they use for like the neutral commentator, if you will. Like when you listen to Sky, you'll hear a neutral commentator that's not a Wednesday fan or the other team. He's just down the middle. So I had to have the spare Sheffield United kit. So obviously on my box it says Sheffield United. So how many times did everyone like to tell me something about that? It's like, I think you got the wrong team, mate. Yes, I know. So that went on for the entire duration of last season, and then I finally got delivered my new kit this summer. So I've got the right. I was going to say, it's not been worth commentating much on.
No, you're absolutely right. I was going to say, I hope before that kit arrived at Blackmore Lane, you bleached it to within an inch of its life.
I have. I did say I have to wash thoroughly afterwards. Yeah.
So before we kind of get into talking about, obviously, like a little bit about yourself and figuring out a little bit more about kind of Sheffield Wednesday, the current circumstances, and obviously the game against Peterborough, it's going back really to you mentioned obviously it was mid-90s when you got into sort of the role that you are doing. What was it that inspired you to get into football commentary? Because it's a role that I think everybody sat at home watching or who's ever listened to a game thinks this would be really fun to have a go at. But so few people actually ever get the opportunity to do so. What was the journey that kind of got you there and what inspired you to get into it?
It was kind of a kid's dream. I must have been 13, 14 or something. So Hallam FM at the time were running a Sports Report of the Year competition. And I think I entered 2 years running and I came runner-up, or certainly in the contenders to win the award. So I think after the second time of having a go at it, Steve Banyard, who was the head of sport at Hallam at the time, he said to me, do you fancy coming down and being part of the team behind the scenes? So there was quite a few of us that were sort of work behind the scenes. So there's the commentators on air, but there's a lot of people actually at Hallam back in that time that have gone on to have very successful careers. So, you may well have, obviously you'll have heard of Paul Walker, who does very well. Paul was I think he was full time. I think he probably went on the same journey. Luke Wildman, who went to Radio Sheffield, and I think he works in Canada and does TV things. So he's done very well. Jack Woodward was another one that he went to Aston Villa and he does a lot of TV work now. So there was quite a lot. And Naz Prenji again also does stuff for Football Focus. So there was a few of us, backstage, if you will, doing the I suppose the nitty gritty. So what you used to do is you'd have the the commentary of the day, or even the ones that weren't the main commentary. So you'd have to do off-tube commentary. So there'd always be the goal clips that we could drop in from Doncaster or Rotherham or whatever. So everyone always had to keep an eye on what was going on in that game from the studio. So you take a recording, you clip the goals, and you do like highlights packages as well, so you play that out at half-time and full-time. And then you might also get to read the sports bulletins and compile all that. And so for me, I got that opportunity quite earlier. So I was covering Steve when he was off on a Monday. So, that kind of was my step in. But, in terms of match reporting, I didn't actually get to the games that early. I think it was a while before I did. I actually did basketball. I did a feature on basketball on the Sheffield Sharks for a good 2 or 3 years. So I was doing that. And then I went and did a H&D journalism course in Barnsley. So that was sort of nearby because I'm from York. So I was commuting to Sheffield. So it wasn't a financial decision when I was kind of, doing the stuff on a Saturday. It was very much of, this is kind of what I want to do. So, an entry into sort of the world of sport. And then obviously once I'd completed my course, I got the opportunity, at Pete 107 and have been at other stations as well since then. But, it was a good grounding as well. I learned a lot, doing what I did. I mean, it was quite good on my college course as well, because, where everyone would do whatever they did for their projects and stuff, I'd be there playing highlight packages from the audio I nicked from Saturdays, work at Hallam FM. So it's pretty good. Here's a highlights package, or here's my basketball feature that I've actually done. So I kind of could have taught some of the classes because I was learning on the job, so to speak.
Because that's the interesting thing is what you've said there is like you effectively got a really, again, me saying it, not yourself, you actually got one of the best educations into how the industry properly works from a day-to-day perspective. We're not talking like the big theory behind it and all the rest of it. You actually saw, well, this is what the job actually looks like, and there's no glitz and glamour to, as you say, chopping up highlights packages, sitting in a studio, keeping an eye on scores and listening for this, and then going and pulling this particular piece of material, and then kind of counting down to somebody who's in front of a microphone, getting them to kind of like ready to pass to the next segment. It is a real grounding. And also, again, please correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, here. You will have heard so many different voices commentate on football. Was it something that you were consciously picking up on, kind of like things that you liked, the way in which that descriptions happened, and you're effectively learning your craft, aren't you, whilst listening to other people?
I think, like most of us, I think, certainly in your teens and whatever, I was passionate about football. Back in the day, I could name, every player in the Premier League or the First Division or whatever it was back then, literally. I'd actually struggle more these days, because you knew everyone. I think it's because it's become such an international game as well. It's like, you lose track of everyone. There are some people that can tell you all about the players on the other side of the world, and I'm not quite as maybe into it as I once was back then. But, you learn from different people, and, I've worked for some very good people, some not so good people as well, but you take the good and you take the bad, and hopefully you mold it. And there are some things even at the time where you think that person was a hard taskmaster, and it even knocked your confidence. There were times where I was like, really like thinking I've done this wrong or whatever, but it's sink or swim, isn't it? And you actually learn a lot as well. Like, I mean, one of the first stations I worked for was Pete 107, and I was kind of news and sport there, but I obviously put together all of their sports show and everything. And because you're such a small team, I mentioned to you about the Wickham example. I think Phil Tooley was the commentator on Chesterfield, so I was sort of driving the desk in the studio, so making sure everything that was playing out. So we might play some songs as well in the build-up, or it'd be a feature playing. And then, I remember one occasion where Phil's line just dropped with about 10, 20 seconds to go. And he was supposed to be the next segment. And I had to run through into the reception area and redial it quickly, run through. And I'm literally, if there was a webcam on me, people would see me literally leaning across, diving towards the fader to knock it up, because he just literally arrived with about 2 seconds to spare. And you kind of get good at blagging it as well. And that was probably one of the best things I ever learned, that, when you work in small teams and you don't have all those people around you, sometimes you get very good at blagging it as well. And I've kind of took that on throughout my career as well. So I can actually do an entire game without doing any research on it, because I'm not really a stat person. I don't really go in for loads of stats. That's not really my style. I like to describe what you see. I'm more interested in what's in front of me. And obviously, yes, I have my knowledge on Wednesday, so it's already in my head anyway a lot of the time. So if I have done commentaries obviously for other teams, and I've done stuff away from Hillsborough and what have you. So that's probably different, because you don't necessarily know all of the players and who plays where or whatever. So you have to probably put more time into it. Now, I suppose I've done this for so long that it can sometimes be with my other work that I do as well, that I am juggling different things, and I haven't got time. I'll just do the team sheet and put it in order, make sure I get the positions right, and hope they get the names correct.
And as you say, you've probably been helped out a little bit by the previous owner in the fact that the squad didn't change much, just for the sheer fact of we'd buy a player and they'd be ours to hold forevermore, and they just stay forever. So you get all of the stats and bits and pieces.
Yeah. No.
Sorry, Rob. I was just going to come on to what led you to Sheffield Wednesday. Then, how did that come about? How did that particular opportunity come about?
Well, obviously, I was a Wednesday fan anyway, so that was a big, I suppose, draw to obviously. I used to listen to the Hallam shows and things, so that's probably where my interest was there to start with. The first Wednesday game I ever saw, we won 7-1 against QPR back in the 1987 season, I think it was. So I thought that's how football was. I was quite a late comer to watch football. I was probably 7 or 8 at the time. So, I was kind of, I think, fortunate because I saw Wednesday, my early years with the Hurst, the Waddles and all that. And I thought we were amazing. We were, truly we were. People perhaps don't realise how good that Sheffield Wednesday team was. We were serious players. It was, Man United, Leeds or Sheffield Wednesday to win the title one of those years. That's how good we were, and it's kind of a little bit demoralizing when you see the way we've fallen down the other way. I've lost track of what your question was, and I'm
no, I was just going to say what sort of led you to becoming obviously involved with the club and being the match day commentator on a day-to-day.
So the Wednesday thing happened because at the time, I think Brian Laws was the manager of Sheffield Wednesday. I was working in Hull actually, so I was head of sport in Hull at a station called KCFM, and I'd been asked to get involved with Wednesday because I think Brian was under pressure as the manager. So John Pearson, who does the commentaries with me, as you'll all know, John works for the football club. So I think there was maybe, because John does a lot or has done a lot of stuff as well for Radio Sheffield and that type of thing. And I think at the time he felt a bit uncomfortable because that there are tough questions to be asked when a manager's under pressure, he's not getting the results, should the manager go? And I think John was being put on the spot a bit at the time and he didn't feel at ease with that. So I think internally there was conversations. I think James Hargreaves, I don't know whether you know James, he was working for the club at the time as well. And he had a conversation with me and I think they were keen to do something in-house. So obviously knowing I was a big Wednesday, I used to come and report on Sheffield Wednesday anyway. So I worked for Real Radio for 6.5 years as well. So I was regularly at Hillsborough doing match reports for that service, because we didn't do commentary at that point. But I used to be there, on a regular basis. So it kind of came from there. And I mean, I'd done a few commentaries before, but I'd been a reporter. So like even in my young years at when I was at Hallam FM, I did Doncaster Rovers, or you get Rotherham or whatever, but you didn't tend to get the bigger teams in the region, that they kind of started on the smaller ones. So, doing Wednesday, I knew I could do it, but it was a bit nerve-wracking. I think the only commentary I'd done on Wednesday before was, I think it was almost like it was non-broadcast commentary. I think I did it for my own experience. I think we had a cup final as well, because real broadcast, I think it might be it was the Sheffield United final against Wolves when they lost in the playoffs. And I think I was kind of put myself forward, to try and to do it. And I didn't end up getting the gig on that day, but I think I'd done a game. I think it was maybe a cup game or something like that. And I had Matt Hamshaw actually as my summariser, and I just did that purely for the experience. So that was the first time I'd done a proper game, with a co-commentator and everything like that. So when I was asked to do it properly, for the iFollow service or whatever it was called, it was Wednesday Player back then. It was something I knew I could do, but it was a little bit out of my comfort zone. Having been the head of sport, and I'd hired other people to be the main commentator, and I look back in kind of like a little bit annoyed at myself a little bit now. Why didn't I put myself forward to commentate on some of the teams I was, working on when I was running departments? I was hiring somebody else to do that job, so it was good for me. But I think that there was always a bit of fear that it's a big leap. Like you don't want to make a mistake, you want to get it right, don't you? So. It's different from being a match reporter, when you do like 15-30-second inserts, which I've done loads of, but I hadn't been like the full match commentator, live.
Because we were speaking obviously before recording about the it's almost like the responsibility that you have as the main commentator for a football club in particular, especially one like Sheffield Wednesday, where it's a side that's not in the top division and hasn't been for a number of years, obviously, is a side where supporters have to go and dig out the games, whether they be abroad or otherwise. And if they're listening to it through the radio, either at home or in the car or wherever, or if they're watching it, in a bar abroad or at home, you've got to kind of set the scene. And as you say, that's so different from like a 30-second snapshot of player X had a shot here, well saved, down low. This was followed up by the insert team name here, went up the other end and a good chance. Game sort of petering out at the moment, still 0-0. And actually, to take a fan on a journey through a game and give them a real flavour of it is really difficult. The next question that I've got for you is, I think this has probably changed quite a lot. It may have done, actually. I'm presuming here. What is your typical match day routine in terms of getting yourself prepped and set for the game? And what does a match day look like for yourself?
I think it varies, and it's obviously changed because I've got more to do, on a match day now. So, I think probably starts on the evening. I'll see what the other teams lineup will be, in terms of the last few games and how they're lined up positionally and all that side. So I try and get a kind of guesstimate of what I think the other team's lineup will be. I tend to focus more on the other team because, like I say, my knowledge on them will be less than it is on Sheffield Wednesday. I could literally just take a game on Wednesday and just run with it. 9 times out of 10, I can do that because it's already in my head. But you do double check on facts, or if there's something significant happening, if you need to work in, remember to say that because it's this, someone's, Liam Palm, for example, 500, those sort of things, or if there's, somebody's passed away and you need to try and remember the detail of that's going to happen in that minute or whatever. So you try and make sure you get all those details down. So I tend to write the teams out in kind of a formation. Obviously that doesn't always stay the same, but I try and get the shape of the team right before a game. Other than that, I mean, it's about, beforehand, meeting my new guest, whoever I've got as the corporate sponsor, and I'll go around the different suites and we'll obviously, chat to them and, try and engage with the supporters as well. And, it's quite interesting as well because you get some really good guests, and it's always nice to pick their brains as well. Even, or if it's a current squad member, you sometimes get little bits about, oh, so what was that about? Or what, so I like to, that's not necessarily on air, but it's quite nice to just get that opportunity just to kind of, and then those bits of information are sometimes useful to feed back into the commentary as well. So like, for example, say a player's injured and people are wondering where he is. Oh, I've just seen so-and-so downstairs and he tells me he's back in a fortnight. That's quite useful to have as well when you get to network, or you go, oh, what's the situation with this, that, so sometimes those bits of information, whilst you might not use it on that day, they're quite nice to have in your locker to bring it as and when you need to.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that leads me on nicely to the next question, which is, what are some of the biggest challenges of live commentary? Because as you say, you'll have all of this going off before a game, and you've already got the game kind of like prepped and mapped out in your head, and you've got kind of like the formations written down. But then if you do just dip downstairs for, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes or so, and you bump into a player downstairs, you've got that loaded in. You think, oh, well, actually, if there is, let's say, I don't know, Dishon Bernard, as he was supposed to be or scheduled to be back before the end of the season. I've just bumped into him downstairs. He's just told me he's unlikely to be back. It's then, how does that frame and shape sort of the discussions that you then go through on a match day? Because there must be challenges that you have broadcasting live football every single game, and they must vary massively because you're so dependent on the product that's happening in front of you. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and sometimes the tougher challenges I find are when I have, should we say, maybe a current player that's your guest, say the games where John's been away for whatever reason.
Yeah.
You've got a guest, and it's actually quite interesting to have a chat with them. But you also have to realize you're doing a commentary as well. Yeah. So you can get caught up in the conversation, and you really want to pick their brains about this because you might not speak to them again or whatever. So that can be the most challenging, I find, when you get a really good guest, that you're thinking, say Kieran Westwood or Sam Hutchinson. We've had them on the show, really interesting guests. And it's nice to be able to just get an insight as well. If they're part of the dressing room or they've been in it, that they'll give you a different take on it. So you can kind of go down different places that perhaps you can't with John, because obviously John's not part of the everyday coaching staff. He's not connected to the here and now. Obviously in the past, I mean, he'll tell you, I think he was involved with the youth team when Tommy Spur and Mark Beavers were coming through. So that era, he had a bit more connect on that. So, it's a difficult one. You obviously have to balance out what you can say and what you can't say as well, because there are things that I might know, but I don't really think that's going to be maybe right for me to say it. If perhaps it's a secret, perhaps it's not out there yet, or it's just confidentiality. Whatever it might be. There are times where you have to make a decision. You're thinking, is that my place to say it or not? So I'm on the spot a bit with that question, and I don't know if I answered it that well, but that's kind of how I feel on that one.
No, but you're right, because as you say, it must be really challenging, because you do have, obviously, working for the club, you do have connections to it, and there will be bits of information that fans would love to hear, but actually striking the balance of whether it's appropriate to actually discuss some of those things must be really challenging, especially, when we come on to the context. I know we're going to talk a little bit later about the context surrounding the current situation and how it must have been commentating this year in particular on the team. That's really, really challenging, I can imagine, to work in terms of a live commentary as well. Yeah,
well, you're editing yourself all the time, so no one necessarily gives you a playbook of what you can and can't do, but you do know there's a sort of basic guidance of what you should and shouldn't do, because it's a different commentary to what I would do if I was doing it for Radio Sheffield to what I do if I'm working for Sheffield Wednesday, because obviously, I can't be dissing the players or the management, because it's not right, is it? You are kind of working for the football club. There are families, their friends, their family are listening, to games, and sometimes you might say something because I am a fan at heart of Sheffield Wednesday, so I might get frustrated, and at times there might be one or two things I think I really shouldn't have said that, because I've just got caught up in the moment. So you are constantly editing yourself, and you're thinking, was that the right thing? Sometimes the wrong thing might come out, that there has been maybe odd incident. I'd like to think I've been pretty good with it, but I spoke to you just off air before we started. When Gary Megson was the manager of Wednesday, he was a bit under pressure at the time. I think there were things going off in the background. And there was one game, I think we were playing Stevenage, and it wasn't a good game. It was coming towards the end of the match. And a fan sends in, we used to read messages out quite a lot, and I must have not really read it properly. And I've just started reading it, and I've then tried to edit myself halfway through it. But by that point, I've said what was said, and it was quite a negative remark. I mean, I'm probably thinking exactly what he's thinking at that point. We're drawing with Stevenage with a minute to go. But I'd said it, and at the time, I think Chris Evans, who was the assistant manager, his son was listening. So then that message gets fed back to the manager. Then that gets fed back to John. And then I had to go and see Paul Aldridge, who was the chief executive at the time, and just got told, just be careful what you say, because the manager didn't like that, And that's a tough one to do, because we've all got opinions. I mean, I might think something about this player or that team shape, but I can't go around and sort of completely hammer, the individuals. Or let's use the elephant in the room. I won't say his name because I refuse to say it now. But that fella, I couldn't mention anything about him at the start of this season. Not that I was told, but I knew I couldn't, because he liked to listen. On social media, we all know he kept at tabs. He's probably listening to us now. I don't know. But you always felt you're having to edit yourself. So I have found this season really tough as a Wednesday fan, because I knew what this season was going to bring. I don't know whether anyone's surprised at what's happened, because I'm not. Right at the start of the season, I knew this was going to be horrendous, and I couldn't wait for it to finish, because best will in the world, we would not on a level. We're not on a level playing field. It's the Championship is a very difficult league, and you cannot expect players that let's be honest, the players that were left were not starting for Sheffield Wednesday, were they, last season? No. And there was a reason for that.
Yeah, you're right, and that does bring me on to sort of what's it like being commentating on the team this year?
Because really hard.
This is. I mean, it's statistically, it's going to go down as the worst season ever recorded at Championship level. We are. I don't mind sticking my neck out and saying it. I think we are going to struggle, probably not going to get back to 0 points in terms of a total. There are 2 wins. I know myself and James have discussed this quite at length. How's it been being the voice of this season?
Yeah, it's been really hard. I mean, I think it was the Coventry game where we got absolutely battered at Hillsborough. And I think in one of the goal clips I said, let's just go home now, and that actually really was what I was feeling, because it's quite hard because when you're commentating, you are concentrating really intensely for sort of 2 hours solid. That's just watching where the ball's going and trying not to miss things, which you do occasionally, but you're trying to keep an eye on it. And also at the back of your mind, again, we're talking about this editing that you do all the time. And I was this season more than ever, I'm having to edit myself and not say what I really think or feel, because I really felt depressed and really annoyed and frustrated. Whatever word you want to say about it, I was not happy. I want to see a Sheffield Wednesday team go out there and be competitive. I don't expect us to win every game, but I expect us to have a chance. And I don't think we really have had a chance. Yes, we've done well. Some of the kids have done well, plus points if you want to draw positives. And that's what you kind of feel like you're trying to like find the positives. But ultimately, in your own mind, you're not feeling positive. And I think I went home after the Coventry game feeling really, really low, because it's like, I think you talk about the mental health of being a football fan and everything that goes with it. It's been such a challenge for all of the fan base. And that's why I feel when, you look at the way that they want to punish us even going forward, it's like, do you want to kick us any more? This fan base has shown how magical we are and how great we are, but we have been put through the mill. And everybody, and I'm talking about everybody at the football club, they must have had some real dark days. I mean, I just go in there for match day, so I'm not privy to that, but I'm a Wednesday fan. So trying to commentate on a team that I just genuinely don't think was ever going to win many games when I'm watching it, I just don't feel like it's like watching the same game. You get to halftime where we've done all right in a lot of games, and then we switch off. And that's, I suppose that's a concentration thing. Is that, I don't know, obviously an inexperienced thing in some cases for the younger players, but there's a lot of it goes into it. And credit to Henrik, he's a super positive guy, and how he keeps his chin up as well. I wish I had that level of positivity. And then it's not easy when it, I love Sheffield Wednesday, it's my team. We've had some dark days, but I just don't feel like this is a competitive season. Like it's not what football's about for me. And if it was, I wouldn't want to do this. If this was the case, I'd step away. I wouldn't want to be a football fan anymore, because this is not normal, is it?
No, you're 100% right, because you have also been in attendance for fan boycotts this year as well. What was the Middlesbrough game like? That was a midweek game where there were 6,500 fans, and the majority of them were from Middlesbrough. What was it like being in the stadium that evening and commentating on that game?
I think there's a real low ebb that night. I think, there were individuals I spoke to, even the ones that I think are very, really positive at the best of times, even they looked like they were really down. Because obviously I see both sides of it. So I see the commentary and the lack of crowd and whatever else, but also like behind the scenes, the corporate side of things, that's dwindled to disappear. And, there's been no VIPs, or there's been no suites that have been empty or whatever, and all the staff that get affected by that. No man of the match presentation, which again I do, and maybe they give it a miss, so things like that. The whole club it just felt really, that was like one of the lowest points, I think, where people needed a change of direction. They needed a bit of good news, and then we saw the complete flip round in 2 days. The atmosphere after they went into administration. Who celebrates going into administration? But that was the feeling that everyone had. It was that euphoria. But the whole fan base. You're like, we're in administration. It's like, why do you celebrate it? Because it's not a good thing. And I think we've seen that as time's gone on. There are painful things to go through. I think January was a prime example where we're losing more players. And people are wondering why, but that is the reality of administration. And the longer it goes on, the more hard it gets. Because I think we've been quite lucky, haven't we, with some of the things that haven't happened. I've seen it happen at other football clubs in my journalism career, where there's been members of staff that have gone. Obviously the results aren't there. In some ways we've got lucky, but we need this to kind of turn around now. And I'm hoping that this consortium with David Storch and everyone will get in there and take us forward again.
Because that week where we had the Middlesbrough game, and then post that we find that the previous chairman's gone, you're then on air the day after for Oxford at home, when the club's had this huge surge of, we went from 6,000 on the Wednesday to 30-odd thousand on the Saturday. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, we lost 2-1. Obviously, we were crap on the day. Like, we just ran out of steam. How do you convey that atmosphere? Because that's such a mood change. Do you just steer into your own sort of natural feelings surrounding the situation?
Yeah, you do, because you feel different. I felt in a different place. I think everybody did. There were people smiling when you walk in the door, and it just felt a different place. And whether people thought it would happen a lot quicker, the next step, if you will, and obviously it hasn't, because, like I said, administration doesn't tend to be that rapid, really. So,
No.
I think there's been a bit of a roller coaster. People have been up and down with the emotions, but certainly for a good couple of weeks after that, there was that real good feel good factor again. The administrator, certainly the communication was a different level. The different bits and pieces, were just coming together, and you thought, yeah, this is what Sheffield Wednesday should be like again. Just basic, good behavior and treating people right and stuff. And I just feel that as a club, we maybe lost our way over the recent years, and hopefully we're going to be having happier times. And that's why, for all the lows of this season, while it is really low, wouldn't it be great if we can just flip it the other way? It's like, I'm not people going about the 15-point deduction. If that happens, yeah, it happens, but that's not the worst thing that we've been through. I think we can fight on. We can do it. We can turn it around. Whether it takes a year to whatever, just the fact there's still a Sheffield Wednesday is what's important.
I could not agree more, Rob. Couldn't agree more. Before I take you back to that wonderful night against Peterborough, who have been some of your favourite players to commentate on over the years watching Sheffield Wednesday?
Favourite players?
We've had some fantastic players, but those players that I suppose as a commentator really give you license to just, because what you're seeing in front of you, like as you say, as a fan in the stands, they do excite you. They do get you out. They do things that get you out of your seat. Who have been some of your favourite players to commentate on?
Well, Antonio, I think, was a great player. He was raw back then, but you could see he had something about him. And I think it's quite nice as well when you see players at the start of the journey and you think they've got a chance of going on and doing more than Wednesday and stuff. And I've seen that obviously as a fan as well. I mean, let's take even an opposition player. I remember that James Justin when he played for Luton, and I thought he's off to the top. You just can see it, can't you? There are individuals that you just can tell. But individuals for Wednesday, I mean, obviously, Baz is great. Forestieri, I thought he was a fabulous forward. I played goalkeeper when I was younger, so I always like looking at the goalkeepers as well. So I look at goalkeepers in a different light. Obviously, I thought Kieran Westwood was amazing at his best. He made some saves that he had no right to keep out. So he was a different level. I'm gonna have to think on that, because Sam Hutchinson again. I liked his passion, the way. I actually thought he was great at the back as well. I know he played midfield, but it's almost like when he played in defence, he didn't have to be quite as rash as he was in midfield, because that was his proper position. That's where he started at Chelsea. So I think when he was in midfield, he kind of felt like he needed to go around chasing everybody and making the tackles. So, there's lots in there, really. I mean, Ross Wallace, that particular bit. I mean, we're talking about the downtime, but that era at the very start.
That 2-year window was...
Good, there was. I mean, Zhao on his day as well. He could be frustrating. He could be amazing. He was kind of, Gary Hooper. We had, great goal scorers. I'm just trying to think back of maybe a bit more of an obscure one that I liked as well. Come back to that. I'll get thinking on that.
Not a problem. All right. So let's go into the big one, the miracle of Hillsborough, because you were obviously the person in front of the microphone for that. So before we get into the game, the night against Peterborough obviously unfolded, but you're the person who has to do all of the preface for the match before for people listening to it either through the website or through watching it through iFollow. What were your thoughts going into it against Peterborough?
Weird, probably like a lot of people. I think after the first leg and probably for the days afterwards, I thought we'd blown it. We'd absolutely blown it. You even look at the league position, and we lost away. Was it Forest Green? Was it?
Yes,
Forest Green. And you're like, how have we lost that? And I remember I was working that day. I was doing something else, and I just remember getting the message coming through, and I think, how have we done that? So you have those sort of dark moments, and I think certainly that the Peterborough one, I felt that way. Pretty much, this was a foregone conclusion. Although for some weird reason, that morning I woke up, and when I was going to the ground, I thought we could do it. And I don't know where that thought came from, but it was in my head. And I think they've said something similar, haven't they, when they've talked about the way they tackled it with the psychologist and everything like that. And it was about compartmentalizing it, wasn't it? You know, if you get one in 15 minutes, get another one, you know. If you can be 2-0 up on the night before half time, that's halfway. You know, it's only 2-0 down, isn't it, if you look at it that way?
Yeah.
And there was just something in the back of my mind that I just thought we could do it, but we left it very late, didn't we? And then even when we get back Wednesday, where you get back to 4-4, and then they score the next one in extra time, don't they? And you're thinking, oh, right, all that for nothing.
All that for absolutely no.
How many times have we seen that? You know,
it's really, because I've spoken to a number of people about this. I've spoken to players who were involved in it, and I've spoken to fans who were obviously in the ground or watching it wherever. When did you, as the person on air, start to genuinely see that there was a real opportunity for this in the 90 minutes? Because, as you say, going before the game and just having the belief as a fan and just kind of trying to, I'm sure in the opening segments and bits and pieces that you were doing, you were trying to convince people, well, if we get one, we might need, you know, if we can get two before half time, it's on. When did you actually think, oh, there's a genuine chance here?
I think it was the second goal. Honestly, the second goal, I just thought they looked like they were shell-shocked by what was going on. And I think that the players have said as well that they were quite a young side, Peterborough. And I think they got into their heads, and you could kind of see they were shrinking on the field. You know, Hillsborough was like it is. You know, when Hillsborough's like that, you know, it is very hard for anybody to kind of get out. We were making the noise. And I honestly think probably when the second goal goes in, I thought this could be on. I mean, you're starting to worry about that, obviously, when the clock's ticking down and everything like that. But there was just, you know, like when you have a weird gut feeling and you get it occasionally. And that was one of those nights where I just thought this could be on. And I wasn't that surprised when we got back to 4-4. I mean, you convey the passion in the moment. And obviously it was very, very late and everything. And, you know, you asked me about, we were chatting off air. You asked me about, you know, do I prep some lines or sayings or things into it? Sometimes you do. That one wasn't. Oh, well, I think the Mission Impossible bit was. Yeah. But obviously, I didn't know that Liam Palmer was going to be Tom Cruise that night.
Absolutely.
It could have been anybody else.
I was going to say, surprised everybody, because I agree with you. Just going back to the second goal, I agree with you. I think that was the goal that was celebrated. Obviously, the Liam Palmer one is at a stretch. Yeah. I think that is one of the best celebrated goals that I have been involved in at Hillsborough, when that second Lee Gregory one hits the back of the net. And I think you can see it when you go back and watch the highlights of the game. The first goal goes in and there's a big like sort of fist pump from people as if to go, come on, we can do it. And that second goal follows, and it's like bedlam, like proper pandemonium. It's like when we played Huddersfield and we went 1-0 up in the playoff semi-final that we lost. It's like when Forestieri scored the disallowed goal against Brighton, and there's like there's rare moments over the course of, I think, successful seasons, in particular at Hillsborough, where you see like a proper explosion from the crowd. And I would argue it was probably more celebrated than the Reece James one, which was third, which I always think is kind of like the forgotten goal of that semi-final, because that Reece James one, it was almost, I think it was also the nature of the celebration as well, is he, excuse me, he puts the ball in the back of the net and then doesn't even go to get the ball, he just turns and runs straight back. And it's really interesting when I go back and like when you watch those highlights, because that's the one that's celebrated most by the manager. And I think that was the one for me where I was like, I'm not fussed about this. We only need one more now. Like, that's great. We've just kind of moved on. When the ball is pinging around I'll go back to before the ball's pinging around in the box. When Will Vaulks is loading that throw up, obviously from the far side, as the commentator, obviously, are you just so engaged in the moment of what's happening, or are you being really conscious to also keep an eye on everything that's going on and thinking, right, how I'm like, or is it just like sixth sense and like automatic? You just kind of kick into going back to.
I'm like a fan at that point. I mean, it's weird actually, because like John's done some of the finals. Like I think I did. Atty knew he was with me for the Barnsley game. Yeah, and he wanted to be in amongst the fans. You know, he wanted to feel, because obviously when you're doing the commentary, you miss that kind of camaraderie and being amongst the supporters. But I actually quite like being kind of doing my thing, if you know what I mean. It's kind of like I was there. I mean, I wasn't on iFollow at the time, but I did Wednesday's win at Cardiff. I did that again for real. It was off tube, so I was commentating on it. But I love having that live buzz of being on the radio, but also being with my team as well. So I like to think that what comes out is pretty unscripted. 9 times, I'm not one for loads of scripts and stuff, where you can hear them a mile away, or you're literally like, oh, how clever am I? I've said like 3 or 4 puns on the bounce. I don't really do that. I want it to come from within. So when I'm commentating, when I'm covering a moment, I'm like you are, You're on your edge of your seat, and I'm pulling. You've seen it if you ever watched any of the lines. We've done a few of those where we've had sort of a commentary cam, and me and John are the same. We're both up there. We're like celebrating with you guys. Probably not supposed to do that in a press box, but we're Wednesday fans, and that's what I try and channel in all my commentaries. I'm just as excited or sad about whether the goal's gone in or hasn't. Depending on which way it's gone. So. Yeah, it's all in the moment. So I just got lost in what happened. I'm watching it. I think I'm come on. I think I said something like, get it in. You're almost like forgetting you're commentating and you're not describing it. You just like saying words and just hoping it lands. That's. I think I say chuck it in, get it in there, or whatever it was.
Because it's as the ball's pinging around in the box. It's the thing that I think makes your version of that goal special is. This is, again, from a journalistic practice, I'm sure is not what you would like. It's the voice crack as the ball goes to the back post. It's as the ball goes to the back post and you realise that Aidan Flint's there to nod it back down. And you can tell the authenticity in it. Because as Liam Palmer puts the ball into the back of the net, the Sky one you can tell is from a neutral perspective, is in my opinion. I think you can tell it because of the way in which that it's said, the way in which that Liam Palmer's name is delivered. I think they get swept up in obviously the emotion of it, but they're not a fan. Yours is, I suppose the best technical term for it would be it's really guttural. Like you can tell that there's so much emotion and so much weight to it. How, after you've done that, and then we go through, obviously, the extra time where Peterborough score and then Callum Patterson pops up late, and then we go through the penalties. Jack Hunt's penalty obviously hits the back of the net. And once the initial celebrations have died down, how do you summarise that game?
Mad. it was, wasn't it? I mean, because it was so late as well, the Liam Palmer goal. Whilst you say that you always thought we had a fair chance or that feeling was there, I think you let that energy that like you say, that kind of raw emotion that we all had and we all felt like, you could feel how happy everybody was in the stadium and stuff. And then penalties are already a bit of an anticlimax anyway, aren't they? They're a bit weird to commentate on. But I mean, how cool was Jack Hunt there, going up there with his chewing gum and stuff? I just felt like we deserved it that season because, we had messed it up, really, hadn't we? I think again we can go back to the previous owner, and I think Darren Moore wanted 1 or 2 players in January just to ensure that we had the squad to see it through, and it didn't happen. And I think there was massive relief, but then there was that weird, the full time. I suppose the thing that was nagging after you've gone from that real high of what have we just witnessed to there's still another game. I really hope we don't mess it up after doing all that and then losing to Barnsley. And there was that kind of like it was tiring and it was draining, but you also, at the back of your mind, you're like, I'm not sure we're just going to necessarily go on and win the final, because I didn't feel as confident about the final. And that's not because I thought Barnsley were great, but I just thought that'd just be the Wednesday way. We often talk about it, but we do tend to do things like that, don't we? That we've lived through it. If you followed Wednesday for any length of time, it's kind of normal.
Yeah, exactly. You tend to find a way to mess it up. So I will just briefly touch on Wembley, because you were obviously on commentary with Atty Newey, weren't you, for that?
Yep.
What was that experience like? Because the game was truly appalling.
Yeah, I mean, it was good to have Atty's insight. I mean, the process of getting Atty was interesting, because I knew that John wanted to go in, with the crowd, and I wanted to be part of it in the way that I'd been, every step of the way. So I think I sort of drew up a bit of a list of, who could I get? I wanted to get a good, really good guest as well.
Yeah.
So I was looking at a few options, and I think Sam Hutchinson was on my list, because obviously I'd done it a couple of times with Sam. He moved on to Reading at that point, I think it was. So he was one of the names. I don't think I got anywhere fast. Didn't manage to make connection with him. And then I reached. How did I make contact now with that? It might have been through Instagram or something like that. And straight away, he goes, "Yeah, what's your number?" And we were literally within 10 minutes on the phone or whatever. And he wasn't. I don't know whether he was going to come to the game, or he might have done, because obviously he still loves Sheffield Wednesday, but he was still playing in Austria. But he wanted to be there, so I think being with Atty was different, but it was good. I mean, you could feel how much he loved the club as well, so it was nice to bounce off the big man. And even after the game as well, he went and saw Barry Bannon and a few of the players he still knew and everything. So I kind of felt a bit more connected because I was kind of with him as well. So that was quite nice, to have him around. It was just different. He was passionate about it. The game wasn't great. I mean, I don't know if you've ever heard it, but we actually celebrate the Will Vokes goal. Yeah, really go nuts when he scores. And I don't think we realised it had been chalked off for a few seconds after. It's like, oh, okay. So that was that was the dress rehearsal.
I always think with that one, Rob, that I am one of the. I know there's lots of Sheffield Wednesday fans who were like, I didn't realise it. It was the first thing I did was look to the linesman because of where my vantage point was. It was, you saw the ball at the back of the net, and I don't know what it was. It was literally just a glance over to the linesman and seeing it got. And obviously everybody's going absolutely crackers around you. And I remember nudging my dad and just going, whoa, settle down, it's offside. And at that point, Will Vokes is mid backflip and everybody's still going absolutely bonkers about it. I don't know what it was, but it was really strange because obviously you're on air for when a 123rd minute winner comes up from Josh Windass. I don't know what it must have been summarising that season, because as you say, the way in which that it ended in both the playoff semi-final and the playoff final was stuff of fairy tales. Like there's no, you throw that out as a movie script and people are just going to chuck it out.
Yeah, no, that's what I said. Yeah, it was.
It's ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it was, as you say, the end of that season had been really, really flat. How do you go about summarising a season like that? Because for me, it's one of my best seasons following this football club. It was so enjoyable, going up and down the country. And then even, I think now looking back, maybe with a bit of blue and white tinted spectacles on, I don't think it would have been as good had we just kind of marched to a league title.
No, I agree. It was the best way to do it. You know, if you can do it and guarantee promotion, you take that, because that is the best way to do it. It's just the fact when you have the other feeling when you don't manage to put it off, that it don't feel quite right. I mean, again, within that game as well, you talk about kind of the goals or the disallowed goal in Will's case. There was a moment, I remember that was when, who was it went through? Was it Connell?
There
Luke
was
O'Connor, I think it was. He missed an absolute sitter. I thought he's going to bag this. This is easier to score. I could not believe he didn't put that away, because I think part of me was like, oh no, this is it.
Yeah, it's Liam Kitchen, isn't it, who picks the ball up on the halfway line, drives pretty much 60 yards, carries the ball forwards, and it's on a plate, isn't it, for Luke O'Connor?
The defence had just split, hadn't it? There was no one back there. He was on his own. He just needs to slide it home, and he's missed. Yeah, that was a tough one. I thought, this is it. This is it. He's gonna bag this, and then that script, that fairy tale. Oh, there's the ending. That horror ending, isn't it? It's like I keep joking this season. It's like, can we have a different script writer? Because it is exactly the same script. Do all right up to half time, then make a mistake 5 minutes into the second half. Another gaff, 2-0 done. That is pretty much it. That is the regular script this year. And we need a different script writer. But it was. It was a relief, I think, at the end of that game to have got the job done. I think it was a different sort of feeling to the Peterborough. That there was euphoria. It was draining, but it was a roller coaster. It was all sorts of different things. It was just relief, I think, beating Barnsley. We'd done it, and it didn't matter whether it was a good game or not. It didn't need to be. You got the right result, and that was all that mattered, wasn't it? Josh put it away.
No, I agree. I think just before we look to finish here, Rob, what do you want to see from the football club in the next 5 years? Where would you like to see Sheffield Wednesday in the next 5 years? Because everybody's got their own timelines and bits and pieces of what they would like and what they think are the most important things. From your perspective, from the person who, again, is the voice for so many, what would you like to see from the football club in the next 5 years?
I think a bit more stability, I suppose, is the key. We kind of tried to chuck money at it, didn't we, under him? and for the first season was really good. The second season, I didn't enjoy that season, by the way, when we got to the playoff semi-final. That was quite boring. The football we played that year was quite boring. I think investment at all levels. We've seen a bit of the youth coming through this season. I think there needs to be an avenue where we encourage the youth to get an opportunity in the first team, because I don't think we have been very good at promoting from within. But equally, you don't just give people a jersey for the sake of it. So I'd like to see a little bit of the youth being brought through. I think clearly the infrastructure needs looking at, and I'm talking about little things as well. Like I work, in kind of events, so I see other event spaces and stuff. Simple things like, it might be a lick of paint in the hospitality suites, a new bar, a new ceiling, make it look less like an office or whatever it might be. Some of the things just to bring that, run Sheffield Wednesday, not just as a football club, which is obviously it needs to be successful as a team on the field. That clearly is the key. But as a business, it should be doing more as well for, bringing in revenue in other ways and, other ideas and getting events down there, whatever that might be, if it's a music act or, you've got someone like Dalton who wants to do, a big fight down there, that'd be amazing to bring that to Hillsborough. And I think we need to do more of that. We need to, you look at the other clubs around Yorkshire, just, look at Leeds United. I mean, in their kind of hospitality areas, they have some amazing suites now. They've got a lot of the former players as well. I think we can do better with embracing and bringing some of the former players back again as well, because we've got some players that, should be down there all the time. Your Wads, your Hursties, your Shezes, great players. We should embrace our history as well as looking to the future. So I think baby steps. I think, yes, we want to have a younger team, but we want to have a successful team as well. So, yeah, I mean, lots of things, isn't it, really? I mean, it's like you don't want to be too greedy. I want to see Wednesday back up there, but, it could be fun. League One can be fun. It was, like you say, that season. I mean, it's not all doom and gloom. I mean, I want to see us have a shot at it, though. I mean, like, I look back at kind of what's happened this season and you wonder what if, because if we'd kept the team we had last season and maybe added one or two, where would we be this season? Because I think we would have had a shot. This hasn't been a good league this season. No. I think we'd be top six with Danny still at the helm and the players that he had. And it is, what if, how far away were we? This is, I look at Rangers as well, and they're chuntering out because they've lost one game all season or something like that. It's like they don't know what they've got. He will win the league for them. I'm pretty sure of that. I think, he was a top manager who did remarkably well with not the greatest players. I think, it's not been a great squad. He just got a tune out of them with what he had. And it's weird, isn't it? I mean, you think back to the start of before Danny's time where we had Cisco in charge, and that was really
that was dire.
That was awful football. But that was sort of like the same players that we'd watched and celebrated with, before. I mean, you asked me about players I like watching. I enjoyed watching Gassama as well, and I often describe it. The Wednesday team this season lacks the X factor. That's what I call it. Yeah. You've got a load of foot soldiers that will work hard and, do whatever they do. But there's nobody that goes, that extra step that can do like Josh Windass can do, or what even Masaba, even though Masaba was up and down as well and he'd make mistakes, but he'd get you off your seat. He could score a goal. He could take on his man. And you need those players, don't you, that just get everyone going. So we need a few more of those colour players, if you will, the ones that just get everyone going and excite them a bit. That's what I think the squad's lacking at the moment. And maybe, some of the younger lads and, some of the more seasoned players, they would be so much better having those guys alongside them.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think, as you say, it's describing those colourful players who bring a game to life for fans, because as you rightly say, we've got a lot of incredibly hard-working players this year. And I'm sure there is individual talent in terms of from in the right team, in the right setup with others around them that brings the best out of their qualities. I always think just on this, I know we said we were kind of rounding it to the end of it, but I always think about this with Jamal Lowe. Jamal Lowe, before arriving here, was such a well-respected and thought-after footballer in terms of his technical ability, his goal-scoring ability, and having that knack for... Whenever I watched him, I always thought he glided across a pitch and would cut inside and just whip one in the far corner, or he would be able to find a way to score a goal.
Yeah.
I look at the way that we have utilised him in his time here. I actually still think his best game for Sheffield Wednesday is his first game against Plymouth. I thought he was exceptional that day.
It was. Yeah, it was good.
So good. And I look at the job that he is doing for this team now and the amount of stick and criticism that he's come in for, fair or unfair. I look at how he is being utilised, and I do have to constantly remind myself that we're asking these players to just do a job. We're not asking them to actually go out and, as you say, be that creative spark that is going to get things out. And I agree with your point. I look at this championship season and I just think, where would this side be from last year in this division? Because I agree, I don't think it's just looking back with some nostalgia to kind of like the football that was played last year in the previous manager. I do think there was quality there to compete. Yeah. Certainly in the top 8 of this division this year, for sure.
And I suppose you take individuals as well, and getting the best out of them, and sometimes it's partnerships, whether it's 2 centre backs or 2 central midfielders or whatever it might be. Look at how different somebody like Ugbo was when he had Poveda around. Poveda made him tick. I noticed that when I think Poveda got injured in that season, he was on loan. Ugbo's role had to change, so he started dropping into the areas that previously Poveda had occupied. But when he had him around, he was moving it around, and at that stage, he was scoring goals for fun. He looked a terrific finisher, did Ugbo, and I'm sure that's still in there somewhere. Do we give up on him? I think next season maybe if you can get his goals back, he can finish. He showed that. It's not like he misses chances when he's playing; he just doesn't get any.
No, I agree. I agree with you. I think again, he is an individual. He's such an interesting case about this football club in the last 2 years, in terms of, as you say, a player who, within the right system, with players around him that get the best out of him, he goes on a run of scoring 7 goals in 7 games. Yeah. That player who, in my opinion, made him tick is injured, and he's scored 1 league goal since. And then that player doesn't end up signing for the football club for monetary values, or the previous chairman not seeing any value in it. And before you know it, you've got a player who's on your hands with nobody to actually serve, especially in particular this year. I know he scored in the EFL Cup away at Bolton, etc. But he's now a player who is, me personally, again, this is just myself personally, I don't see a way back for him at Sheffield Wednesday.
I think it's hard. Yeah, I know what you mean. And obviously, when the fans, the good, the bad, sort of the ugly, the supporters will get right behind you, but sometimes it is hard to kind of get them back on side again. But it would be great. We're all willing him to score. I just love him to kind of get that fairy tale. I mean, it would be great, wouldn't it, if he come on in the Sheffield Derby or something and got like an equaliser or a winning goal. You can't. That's what he needs. He needs that kind of fairy tale moment that we've talked about the Peterborough. Just something maybe that just could kickstart him again and what have you. But I mean, there are young lads. I mean, I think George Brown looks like he's got something about him. I know he hasn't played that much with injury. He looks like he's got a bit about him. Ernie Weaver, I think, has got a future. They're the 2 for me that really stand out. So, with some experienced guys, we need to be on it as well. I mean, that's why I'm desperate to see the takeover get done now, so we can get planning for next season. Let's be first to get the free transfers, the good ones that are out there. And there will be, do your homework and get them in. And, people will still want to play for Wednesday, whatever constraints we're going to have on us.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. So to finish with, Rob, I've got a handful of quick fire questions for you, and it's not something that I would ordinarily do, but you have a slightly more unique experience here, so I thought I'm going to do these as quick fire as I can. So again, don't think too much about it, just first answer that comes to your head. So first one, besides Hillsborough, favourite stadium?
I really should have prepped for this better, shouldn't I?
Don't worry about it.
Favorite stadium? You need to edit this. I'm gonna have to think about this. Going on forever, aren't I?
Don't worry, I can move on to your next one whilst you're having to think about that one.
Yeah.
This one I think is a fairly. I've got one player who springs straight to mind here. Most underrated Sheffield Wednesday player that you've seen.
Underrated player, I think. It's probably, I don't know. I would like to say Paul Warhurst, but he was my favourite player, and he wasn't like in that team that was full of superstars. And I know he had the goal scoring, and that's what everyone will talk about because he was banging him in for a spell. But he was a brilliant centre half. I like centre halves that do that, that have that bit of speed. He used to always go on a run. What he used to do, he'd dribble up the field, do a little 1-2 on the edge of the area, and then whoever was passing it back to him would mess it up, and he'd have to run all the way back. Probably Paul Warhurst.
Best advice for a young broadcaster?
Just be yourself. I think, yes, take in bits that you see from other people, but I think, I don't copy anyone else. I just try and be myself. You're not going to please everyone. There'll be people that like my commentary. There'll be people that don't, but, I say I'm raw. I say it as it is. I'm probably not the most polished broadcaster, but I think it comes from the heart. And that's what, particularly there's a difference. I think, I have commented on other teams. Best one, actually, I'm going off on a tangent, but you're making me think about things. When I was at BR&B working in Birmingham, I was commentating for Birmingham City against Sheffield Wednesday, and Steve Harkness scored for Wednesday. And obviously, I'm trying to be a little bit muted on that goal, but I think it was pretty obvious that I was still a Wednesday fan. Yeah. I remember saying something to Tom, who was the head of sport there. I think I'd said something about Sibon or something about whatever he'd done at the time, and he goes, "I don't think anyone cares." I'm like, whatever, I did.
Thanks, Tom. Two more then. So aside from the obvious one, favourite Sheffield Wednesday match that you've commentated on?
Favourite game? I think it's probably one of the Steel City derbies. I think it was actually this again was before, so it's not a commentary again. I was doing reports, but it was the Owusu game, and when Lloyd Owusu literally came on, that were pretty magical. I enjoyed that one. And also, there was one at Bramall Lane. I think that was in the Gary Megson promotion season.
2012, the 2-2.
Dave Jones, if you want to give him credit. That was when we came back from 2 down, I think it was. Yeah. I enjoyed that one away. That was a good game. So, obviously, and there's been a couple of Barnsley games as well I've enjoyed over the years too.
Yeah, the Medine goal that never was, according to lots of Sheffield United fans, but we move on from that. And then last one is one word to describe Sheffield Wednesday.
Emotional.
Perfect answer. All right, Rob, genuinely thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks to Ron as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Please explain the context behind Big Ron.
So I used to work at Real Radio, so we used to do a sports phone-in, and we actually got Ron in, actually. It was my idea to get Ron in, because it was when he was put out to tender for a while, if you remember. Yeah. So we got Ron in because we wanted to get a big name, because we used to have Emlyn Hughes doing the sports phone-in, so I thought, I think Ron would be great to get on it. So Ron came to do the football phone-in. He used to travel a couple of times a week. And so Ron gave me that as a birthday present. So he's got the Rumbelows Cup, which obviously he won as the Sheffield Wednesday manager, and he's pictured in an insert having won the League Cup as well with Manchester United. So that was his gift to me. So it's a personalised photograph with his signature as well somewhere. I think it's rubbed out. It's there to Rob. There you go.
Beautiful. Rob, thank you so much for joining us this evening and giving us an insight into sort of what you do, and your time on the microphone of being the voice behind Sheffield Wednesday for so many. I do really appreciate it. Okay, so thank you so much for taking the time out this evening.
It's all right. Sorry I missed those answers on favourite ground. I still can't decide what it is.
Don't worry about it. It's absolutely fine. It's something for you to think on anyway. Thank you so much for listening all. Please catch us on the Wednesday... there we go. Perfect. We got it in. Please catch us on the debate show on Wednesday evening, and then obviously on the Sunday for our main show. Thank you very much all. Take care.